If you call yourself a member of Dub Nation, it is weird watching this incredibly exciting postseason and not having the Warriors a part of it. The NBA postseason has been thrilling. We're going to be touching on it. Hope that didn't sound weird. Throughout the process, given the Warriors are not in it, but of course the focus of this program will be your Golden State Warriors and what they're doing, what they're planning on doing. But we still have to review what happened. And today, I'm going to talk about Mike Dunleavy Jr. Did he do a good job? Could he have done more? What does he plan on doing next? Is he even the real GM, or is that just a title in name only? We'll talk about all of that and so much more next. This is Locked On Warriors.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. You could follow me. I'm free on social media. Follow me over on Threads at Dog Wild. The program is also there. You can follow it at Locked On Warriors. And before we get into talking about the Warriors, I first want to real quickly discuss one of the most exciting, thrilling, entertaining doubleheaders of NBA postseason basketball, I think, in the history of this game, of the NBA itself. I'm referring to last night's. I'm recording this on Tuesday, April 23rd. Yesterday, Earth Day, was my birthday, so I apologize for not having a show. I just like to decompress on that depressing day and veg out, and that's what I did. Back at it here on a Tuesday. Last night, it was Lakers Nuggets, it was Sixers Knicks, and those were two of the most titillating affairs that I've personally ever watched when it comes to NBA basketball. Those were unbelievable games. Again, in my humble opinion, the most, arguably, exciting doubleheader of NBA basketball in the history of this great game. You had two buzzer beaters. The Jamal Murray one was absolutely incredible. And the Denver Nuggets are just showing just really how difficult of a team they are to beat. They've got size from top to bottom. You've got Nikola Jokic, who's got the skill set of a guard and the body of a huge center. Oh, even like Michael Porter Jr. is hitting huge clutch shots. Never mind the fact that his family, at least his brothers, are, I mean, that's a tumultuous scene there, with one banned from the NBA, the other with legal issues. He's keeping his focus. He's hitting those big shots. People forget the dude is also massive in terms of size. He's 6'10" as your small forward. And so when you're playing the Nuggets, you're not only playing this complete team where 1 through 5, each player serves a purpose, serves a role. You have all worldly transcendence in terms of Nikola Jokic. Jamal Murray is your point guard at 6'5". He's in the traditional sense much more of a shooting guard than he would be a point guard. But him and Jokic run that pick and roll perfectly, and he hit that buzzer beater to win the game. What a thrilling affair that was. Lakers, if you are a Warriors fan who hates the Lakers, yeah, you're jonesing right now. This is a good time for you, because Lakers Nation is in a pure tumult right now. But these are some fantastic games. And then ex-Warrior Dante DiVincenzo with the second opportunity to hit the game winner there, and he nailed that. He looks like a totally different player than what we saw here at Golden State last year. Chris Paul, who we're going to be talking about a lot on today's show, basically took his role from a year ago. And what you got with Chris Paul instead of Dante DiVincenzo is an older, smaller player who is not as effective defensively, who is not as good of a three-point shooter, who just is not as explosive offensively. DiVincenzo is relishing basically being the de facto shooting guard for the Knicks. And the fact that he plays alongside Jalen Brunson, I don't think hurts. Brunson is larger than your typical point guard. The dude has muscle on that body, and he makes life easier for his teammates, including DiVincenzo, again, who's relishing. Congrats to him. It hurts seeing ex-Warriors thriving in other places, but I digress. Today's episode, so I just wanted to give a shout out to the playoffs so far. These might be the most might be the most entertaining first round of NBA playoffs ever. I've never seen anything this deep. Mavericks Clippers is a series you could easily see in most other years as a Western Conference final series, never mind Nuggets, Lakers, or most of these other series for that matter. This is some entertaining basketball. We're getting Chuck and the gang for NBA on TNT almost every night. This is a good time. This is my favorite time of year when it comes to sports. And again, such a shame that the Golden State Warriors aren't a part of it. And so I wanted to focus, now that we're going to the Warriors, on Mike Dunleavy Jr., the new GM of the Warriors. There are some people out there, my dear friend, former Golden State Warriors beat reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle, Connor Letourneau, he tweeted out the other day that the dynasty actually ended a year ago. Might be true. That in my opinion, Bob Myers deserves so much credit for the dynasty in the first place. Never mind the fact that he was in charge to hire the head coach that a lot of people still defend, not me. He drafted Draymond Green. He was the assistant GM when they drafted Klay Thompson. He was the architect behind all the free agent signings, Andre Iguodala, Sean Livingston, David West. He was the architect of the Kevin Durant trade, which was brimming with ingenuity. And he drafted two players that I think represent the future of the Warriors in terms of Kuminga and Moses Moody. He drafted Jordan Poole, who did play a pivotal role for the team winning a title in 2022. So weird how that went down still to this day. Yeah, there are negatives as well, but there's no such thing as perfection in any job, especially in the NBA front office. So when Bob Myers left a year ago, and we've covered that topic ad nauseum here on this program, some could say, as I mentioned Connor's name, that the dynasty ended with him. And you could make that argument. I mean, fast forward a year, yeah, the Golden State Warriors improved by 2 games, but it wasn't enough to get them in the playoffs. A lot of people are talking about the Warriors and the fact that they finished 46-36 this year, a 2-game improvement from a year ago, which is impressive. But let's not pretend that 46 wins is all worldly, is something to brag about. It's if you're not hitting the 50 win mark, you're not epitomizing greatness. Okay. There's, I always think back to a season like this. It always reminds me of the Golden State Warriors a year after the We Believe team that shocked the world, beating the Mavericks in the first round of the playoffs. The next season, they were actually better, and they finished that year with 48 regular season wins and also did not make the playoffs. No one remembers that team for that exact reason. Results matter. All right. If you're trying to spin 46 wins as a good thing, that's propaganda, folks. So what role did Mike Dunleavy Jr. play in all this? A lot of people praise him for drafting Brandon Podziemski and Trayce Jackson-Davis, myself included. He deserves praise for that. That was a fantastic draft. I don't know where the Warriors would be this season, certainly not hitting 46 wins, if they didn't draft those 2 players. And Dunleavy Jr.'s strategy was different than what Bob Myers did previously. Bob Myers was swinging for the fences with talent being the primary focus, regardless of how ready the player is. Now, and again, case in point, Kuminga and Moody, they were not this ready compared to Podziemski and Trayce Jackson-Davis in year 1. They were also 2 years younger than Podziemski was this year and 5 years younger than what Trayce Jackson-Davis was this year. So they were much more raw players, but you could see their ceiling being astronomically higher. But for a team that saw its veterans on the decline, most of them, they were desperately needed. And both Podziemski and Trayce Jackson-Davis delivered. You've heard me mention the fact that the Warriors, I didn't think should have passed up on Cam Whitmore. I still think that's to be determined, but I have zero complaints about Brandon Podziemski. I love this kid. He represents the future of the Warriors. He's a gritty kid. The fact that he's one of the team's leaders in reboundings speaks volumes. It explains why he averaged over 8 rebounds a game in college. And we started seeing that three-point shot fall toward the end of the season. I believe he shot over 50% from deep. Maybe it was even over 60% from deep just in the month of April alone. So Dunleavy Jr., in terms of the draft, scored an A. He was fantastic. Now, the draft is not the only responsibility of the GM. There's also trades. There's also free agent acquisitions. And that's what we're going to talk about next. We're also going to play some sound from Mike Dunleavy Jr.'s exit interview. Said some pretty interesting things. We're going to break it all down after we give some love to our sponsors for this evening, our wonderful, amazing sponsors. And first up on the agenda is Game Time. And Game Time is your absolute resource for tickets. One of the best parts about Game Time, and there's a few things you could say are the best parts, include the availability of tickets, the supply they have for last-minute deals. Spontaneity, in my opinion, should be rewarded, should be cherished. But spontaneity is not welcomed in the general ticket buying game. Things sell out, especially if they're popular. Well, your odds for finding tickets last minute drastically increase with Game Time. They've got the supply, folks. They also provide a phenomenal view of your prospective seats on their app or their website. And this is the best part in terms of Game Time to me. They offer a low price guarantee. Now, what does that mean exactly? It means, let's say you buy some tickets from Game Time, and then you decide, I'm going to go peruse. I'm going to go see what else is being offered out there from other ticket brokers. And let's say you find those same seats in the same row and section that you bought for a lower price. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's a low price guarantee, folks. That is awesome. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And today's episode is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. This is a really fun sponsor that we picked up here. It's the classic game. And look, we all have competitive sides. People have told me I'm a competitive person. We all do. And my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with friends. You can charge them rent on your iconic properties, just like the classic Monopoly game, but you can also heist their vaults of riches for yourself, and the leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. It's not just the competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all over the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Locked On NFL Mock Draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, including my San Francisco 49ers, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Threads at Dog Wild. And want to quickly mention, as I'm going to for now in the immediate future, we're taking sponsors, folks, and more specifically, local sponsors. And I'm not just speaking geographically. I'm talking about locally in terms of this show. We're going to make it worth your while, folks. If you've got a business you want to grow, if you got exposure that you're seeking to get a bigger audience, advertise with us. It's a phenomenal opportunity. I'm already hearing from people. I'm super excited about this. Get in on the action while there are slots available. This is a limited resource. Sponsor us. All you got to do is email that address right there. If you're watching on YouTube, warriors24pod@gmail.com. One more time, warriors24pod@gmail.com. Be a part of the program. There's plenty of room. And we're going to talk about Mike Dunleavy Jr. right now. He had his exit interview, and the first of 3 sound bites I want to play pertains to Chris Paul. And when I bring up Chris Paul, I'm also reminded of the fact that you shouldn't take every word at heart when a GM or a head coach is speaking at a press conference. Case in point, Jordan Poole. A year ago, around this time, Mike Dunleavy Jr. was saying that he's not going anywhere. He's a part of the team. And then days later, he was traded for Chris Paul. Now, some will make the argument that the trade to get Chris Paul was a money-saving decision because of Jordan Poole's exorbitant contract where he had just signed a $120+ million deal. Chris Paul was potentially on an expiring deal, although he does have a $30 million team option that my guess is they're going to exercise, not necessarily to keep him on the team, but more so to use as an asset to trade. It's one of the most important assets they have for the simple reason that in the NBA, with the collective bargaining agreement, if you're going to make a trade with another team, salaries have to match. So the Warriors cannot get a big name out there. First of all, they can't get anyone in terms of free agency. They were over the cap as is. This is before Klay Thompson. This is before exercising Chris Paul's contract. They're already over the cap. So they can't sign free agents. If they don't go over the second apron, they can add players through the mid-level exception, which is a small salary slot that the NBA allows teams to use, even if you're over the cap, to sign free agents up to a certain amount. The amounts are usually somewhere around 7 to 12 million is what's allotted, depending on which apron you're in. And so the Warriors, I imagine, and Joe Lacob has said this, I imagine they don't want to go over that second apron. They want the freedom to use that mid-level exception so that they could actually sign free agents they could use out there and not get burned time and again with only having the veteran minimum. So Chris Paul carries value in that regard. But despite the rhetoric that you may have heard, Steve Kerr said he wants him back. Even Mike Dunleavy Jr., as you're going to hear in a moment, said they're interested in bringing him back. The problem with bringing him back is you're going to basically push yourself into the second apron again. You're going to remove yourself from eligibility for the mid-level exception. And maybe the most important part of all this is you're getting an aging NBA player, the third oldest in the NBA currently, behind PJ Tucker and LeBron James. You're going to get him back with another year on the tires. The dude is 6 feet. He's a good, not great three-point shooter. From what I saw, the most value he brings, and to me, the best part about him this season was his tutelage, his guidance, his leadership of the team's younger players. He's been instrumental in Kuminga's growth, in Trace Jackson Davis's growth, Pajemski, Moody. These players have relied largely on his mentorship. And for that reason, I loved him being on the team this year. I cringed every time we saw Chris Paul and Stephen Curry out there together. It is weird that Steve Kerr himself acknowledged recently that those two out there together pose a massive issue in terms of a lack of size defensively, yet he still would trot them out there together, especially at the end of games routinely. They would lose a lot of those games for good reason because opposing teams see those two out there and think to themselves, what defense? I'm 5'10", the average height of a male on this planet. If I was playing if I was playing basketball and a defender who was on me came in at 5'6", 5'4", which would be the equivalent of a 6'6" player seeing Chris Paul suddenly guarding him, I would have no fear in the world. I'd either back that dude down or I would take an unimpeded shot because that's what a lack of height allows the opposition. And so Chris Paul, again, he brings value as a coach, which is what he really is what he brought to the table this season. He was essentially a player coach doing what the actual coaches could not do, which is develop younger players. But for the price to bring him back, that's a little much. Let's hear real fast from Mike Dunleavy Jr. regarding Chris Paul and what the future holds there. Here is Warriors GM Mike Dunleavy Jr.
I mean, I think overall was really pleased with Chris having him on this team this year. What he gave us in the locker room, on the court, off the court. I think admittedly he probably wished he had a larger role and could help the team a little bit more. But I think moving forward, because of his production and the guy can still do it and what he means to winning and all that stuff, we certainly have interest in bringing him back. But the puzzle stuff we got to look at and figure out and see. And there's definitely a viable path to do that. But we're not really down the road yet of specifically what we can and can't do.
And the bottom line, again, when it comes to Chris Paul, you already have Brandon Pajemski to handle that backup point guard spot. You already have Lester Quinones, who has proven he can play in this game, who's a bigger player, who's more athletic, and who could bring more to the table defensively. And you already have Stephen Curry and Draymond Green. You already have two veteran point guards on your lineup. Chris Paul is a redundancy. And again, great for leading the young players, but not great for producing wins and making your team, especially a Stephen Curry team, a title contender. Not good for that. So I highly doubt he's going to come back. And I'm going to read his stats on what he did for the year before playing the remaining sound of Dunleavy Jr. and discussing what he has to deal with this offseason in just a moment after we give some love to our final sponsor of the day. And that sponsor is Prize Picks, one of my favorite sponsors, simply because I play it. It's fun. It makes it look, if you're using Prize Picks for all of this postseason action, these incredibly entertaining games are that much better because you're now not only following the action, but you've got money vested on individuals and whether or not they're scoring more than or less than certain totals, whether they're grabbing more than or less than certain rebounding totals, whatever the case may be. Prize Picks makes something that's already beautiful and fun, and that's basketball, so much better. And look, you can bet on more than just basketball. You can bet on baseball. You can bet on hockey, soccer, football. It's so much fun. And again, it's daily fantasy sports. So you're betting on individuals, not teams. That allows Prize Picks to be legal here in California. And you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You could turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, and so much more in terms of sports entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy app. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. For the everydayers, we're going to be back at this tomorrow. And at some point this week, I hope to get Sam Gordon. He's the Warriors beat reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle. But the particularly big guest I'm really excited for is the voice of the NBA, at least one of the two individuals you can say that about. Mike Breen being one of them, Mark Jones being the other. You hear his voice calling a lot of these incredibly exciting basketball games for ESPN, and Mark is going to join the program either later this week or sometime next week to talk about the Warriors, talk about the playoffs. He's a great dude. Should be a fun time. And again, if you follow me on Threads at Dog Wild, you can stay posted on everything going on. The program is also on Threads as well at Locked On Warriors. We're talking about Mike Dunleavy Jr. today. And before we resume with the Dunleavy conversation, let's hear from Chris Paul. And I want to read his stats on the year, how he actually did. But first and foremost, here is Chris. This was during exit interview days, plural, at the Warriors headquarters, talking about his unique experience playing for the Golden State Warriors. Folks, none of us expected this, yet we saw it for the last year.
Hey, Chris. After a season here, reflecting back, what was it like to play for the Warriors?
It was a unique experience. You know what I mean? I'm glad I got an opportunity to play with the guys that I did, get a chance to meet new people, play for an organization I never would have imagined I played for. But, I'm grateful for the experience. And, yeah.
That being said, if you had an opportunity to play again here next year, is that something you'd like to exercise?
I mean, I'm open to all, things. I think right now what's on my mind probably is getting back, spending some time with my family, seeing them. I'm forever grateful to the organization and whatnot and how much they allowed me to get back and see my family as much. It's a big summer, our team came up short. But it was a tough season, another hand surgery number 5. But all in all, it was fun battling with these guys. I just hope at some point I can get out there and play and try to make a bigger impact.
And, again, he brought tremendous value in terms of leading and guiding the young players on this roster. Statistically speaking, for the season, it wasn't a bad year, but there was nothing all-star level about it. There was nothing, nothing out of this world. He played 58 games this year. He mentioned his 5th hand injury. He missed approximately 2 months because of that. He started 18 games. He started a game sometimes for Steph and Curry. Sometimes he started alongside Steph. I wasn't a fan of those games. Averaged 26.4 minutes per game. Before the season started, you heard this on the program, I didn't want to see him play more than 20. 26 was a little too much for Chris Paul. Especially at this stage of his career, especially given his size limitations. 6 minutes too many. You could have divvied those 6 minutes up to Moses Moody. You could have even divvied these up to Lester Quinones. You could have divvied those minutes up and had a bigger lineup up there that is not so point guard dependent. One of Steve Kerr's many flaws is just his infatuation with ball handlers. He shot 44.1% from the field this season, 3 percentage points below his career average of 47.1%. He shot 37.1% from deep, a number that steadily went up. He was struggling a lot from beyond the arc to start the season. And 37.1 is right in tune with his career average of 36.9%. He shot 82.7% from the free throw line, almost 5 percentage points below his career average of 87%. He was led the team in assists this year, averaged 6.8 assists per game, well below his career average of 9.4. But he also played close to 8 minutes less than his career average of 34.1 minutes per game. And steals have always been a category he's excelled at, averaged 1.2 steals per game. That number is slightly down from his career average. Actually, not slightly, considerably down from his career average of 2.1 steals per game. He's one of the all-time leaders in that category. He averaged 9.2 points per game. And that's a meager number. Chris Paul finished the season tied for 5th on the team in scoring with those 9.2, equaling the number of Brandon Pajemski. Andrew Wiggins was 4th on the team in scoring, averaging 13.2 points per game. Jonathan Kuminga, 3rd at 16.1 points per game. Klay Thompson averaged 17.9, second highest, and then Stephen Curry led the team in scoring at 26.4. So that's Chris Paul for you. Now, one thing Mike Dunleavy said is he's not going to let the loss to the Kings affect the team's off-season decision-making, which was kind of interesting. Here is Mike Dunleavy.
I don't take that game into consideration too much. That was the worst game we played all year. Give credit to Sacramento. They did a great job. But, I watched this team for 82 games. I mean, the amount of times that we've been ran off the court, very few. I think there were a couple of home games in January. Obviously, the Boston game where that was a different scenario. But, that was a game last night where I think or the other night where you got to be careful of like overreacting to how it went. I don't think that represented our team on the whole for the season. But that being said, it kind of put the stamp on what the reality of this year was. So here we are. And I would say going into that game, whether win or lose, no matter how it happened, I knew we had to get better.
Yeah. So a whole lot of nothing in that quote, basically. He's essentially saying, let's not overreact to that game, but it does represent a very bad thing that they lost a play-in game. I hear some people mention that, the Warriors led the NBA in clutch games this season. A lot of their losses were in close games. They weren't exactly blown out in a lot of affairs, but they were a 500 team in those close games. You can make the argument they shouldn't have been in so many close games to begin with. And I think I saw a stat just the other day that the Denver Nuggets had played 10 less clutch games than the Warriors, but were 8 games above 500 in that same category. So staying in close games, yeah, that's great. You're competitive, but this is a results-driven league. This is a results-driven world. And the results were a disappointment. The biggest disappointment in all this is Steph. One of the greatest players this game has ever seen. The Warriors and their fan base have been insanely lucky to have him on this team. And there is, when we talk about the argument for legacy, a massive difference between an individual having 4 championships and an individual having 5 championships. It's likely not going to happen, but if LeBron James won a 5th title this year, now he's legitimately in the GOAT conversation. I would still give the nod to Jordan for the simple reason that if you put a gun to my head and said your life depends on it, who would you rather trust, Jordan or LeBron? Jordan, 100 out of 100 times. But when the gap between those two is shrunk to 1 championship, then all those career numbers, the longevity, that suddenly carries more weight in the overall debate, because that's one thing Jordan did not have on LeBron is the longevity. And the same applies to Stephen Curry. I still cannot support an argument that says Stephen Curry is the greatest point guard ever. I still give the nod to Magic. Championships do matter, especially in a sport where there's only 5 people out there on the court. It's not like football with 22. It's not like baseball with 25. You only got 11. I'm sorry, you only got 5. So the individual does play a profound difference in those titles. And I want to see Steph win 5. And I do think the Warriors, under the right circumstances, could have set this up to have Steph win 5. And that's the disappointment here. And I'm very curious to see what this team does next season, for Wardell? We'll find out. Folks, thank you so much for joining me as always. We'll be back at this very soon. Bye-bye.